Nau mai, haere mai, kia ora tātou, and welcome to this session of 2 to the power of 5, the power of queer words, brought to you by Same Same But Different, Aotearoa's only queer literary festival. Same Same would like to thank Creative New Zealand for their kind and generous sponsorship that has made this festival possible. My name is Gina COLE and I'm hosting this session. This is the Writing Workshop. The format will be that of a discussion with our two wonderful guests who will talk about their approaches to writing and the craft of writing. They will also share some ideas and exercises for you to use to hone your writing craft. You are welcome to make comments or ask questions. Please use the chat function and we will try to answer some of your questions either as we go through or closer to the end of the session. I'd like to welcome our two incredible writers and teachers. First, Renee. Renee is Ngati Kahungungu Scots. She is a takatapui feminist and has been writing seriously since 1981 with her play Setting the Table. Since then, she's written many plays, novels, and non-fiction. She teaches courses on writing a memoir and writing a crime novel. Her memoir, These Two Hands, was published in 2017 by Makaro Press, and her first crime novel, The Wild Card, was published in 2019 by Cuba Press, and it has just been longlisted for the Ngaio Marsh Award for Best Crime Novel. Among her many awards, Renee is a recipient of the Officer of New Zealand Order of Merit for Services to Literature and Drama, a Creative New Zealand Wakatoi Award, and a Sir Kingi Ihaka Award. In 2018, Renee received the prestigious New Zealand Prime Minister's Award for Literary Achievement in Fiction. Kia ora, Renee.
Kia ora, Gina.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Our next amazing writer is Joanne DRAYTON. Joanne is an acclaimed New York Times best-selling author who has published 6 books and numerous chapters and articles. In 2007, she was awarded a National Library Fellowship, and in 2017, the prestigious Logan Fellowship at the Carey Institute in upstate New York. In 2019, her book Hudson and Hall's The Food of Love was the winner of the coveted Royal Society Te Aparangi Award for General Non-Fiction at the Ockham New Zealand Book Awards. Kia ora, Joanne, how are you?
Oh, good, thank you. I'm looking forward to the session. It sounds fantastic.
So we're going to start with a discussion about writing. You are both very successful and very prolific writers, and I wonder if you could both share with us your approaches to writing, your philosophy about writing, and how that shapes your writing practice.
Sure. I believe in the act of writing. I think writing leads me. I don't get too fussed about if I don't really know quite where I'm going, because nothing is ever set in concrete and I can change things or whatever. I like to know at the start what it is I like. Is it a play? Is it a novel? Is it a non-fiction? Is it a poem? That sort of thing. And once I've made up my mind about that, then I might look at the structural shape of it. If it's a novel, like, am I going to do it in chapters or am I going to do it in parts? If it's a play, you know, is it a 1-act or a 2-act or whatever? Those sorts of things. But as I say, nothing's set in concrete. So I just write every day. And some days it's no good, it's just crap, and I just get rid of it. But it doesn't really worry me because I know now from experience that I will get somewhere, and that is really, I'll get where I'm heading. And whatever has led me to, sometimes just a line that I've heard someone say that makes me, I take it away with me and think about. Sometimes it's something I see or something I've read. And sometimes, like the first crime novel, is just something I did because I wanted to see if what I was teaching worked. So I decided the only way to do that was to actually write along with the students. So that's how that came about. Yeah, so there's all sorts of ways really, but I think overriding everything, my philosophy is you've got to work, you just got to sit down and do it.
Yeah, well, if I have changed actually over the years, so my approach is different now to the way that I started. I've come from a sort of academic background, so in some ways my life has been about unlearning the things I learnt as an academic, or when I was doing my PhD. So I started quite firmly attached to the material that I had researched, and sometimes I remember when I was beginning my work, I kind of thought I used other people's words instead of my own often, because I mean that's part of the nonfiction deal, and it's another voice, and I was always happy when someone else, in a way, well, it saved me the job. and what's happened over the years is I've sort of unlearnt and found my own voice, and I start with research, but I don't necessarily tie what I do to the research. Now what I do is I tie it to the facts, so if I have a fact that has to shape what I'm doing, then I'll include that. But what I usually try now to do is say it in my own words, write it in my own words, and actually live it. So in other words, instead of sort of it being an intellectual exercise, it's becoming a kind of creative exercise. I was going to say an emotional one, but I don't think emotion is exactly what it is. So so now I actually try not to write with other sources around me. And I try to only the facts that I need, so that it is my voice, it is my interpretation, and I have a structure, but I've left that safety net behind, so that I let a holistic story kind of tell itself. So it's been a great. I mean, it's been a release for me, a letting go of the things that kind of held me back, really propped me up but held me back. So yeah, and I write as often as I can, because it's fantastic escape from the world of emptying the dishwasher and going to work. So I love it. Yeah, so I guess in my philosophy, I think my philosophy is unlocking the story that is in something, finding it, not and being open to the way that it shapes itself and tells its own. It has its own life. It takes on its own life, and I think that's it. It's allowed a kind of release for me. So I've really enjoyed actually. So I've moved much more towards a kind of creative nonfiction. So in other words, incorporating techniques and ways of approaching writing that are much more aligned to fictional techniques, so that you engage and create a story, move people along, transport them with you, carry them, because information is life, not death. So yeah, I guess that's how I sort of approach it.
And how important do you think it is for writers to read?
I think it's crucial. I think that's how we learn, really. It's the tool that writers have, and it's so easy because it's all around us. We can read in books, newspapers, we can read online, whatever we do. And the thing is, if we read as a writer, we start noticing the how of it. We notice how they've done it, and we either like it or we don't, or it moves us or it doesn't. And whatever happens, and sometimes we learn more from the things we don't like, because we find out how we don't want to do it. And yes, I've been reading since I was 5, and I think probably most of what I've written has been the structure anyway, and the shape and that kind of thing has all been because I've seen other people try it, and they've either, you know, not done it well or not well enough, or they've done it brilliantly, and all of that has helped. Yeah. And the other thing with reading is your vocab. I think it was P.D. James or someone who said if she had no other thing to say to a beginning writer, that was what she would say, was enlarge your vocab. Because we all get a bit lazy, we all tend to use same old words and stuff. So if we deliberately branch out and use new words, then all to the good. Mm.
Yeah, well, I can, in my line of kind of writing, you can't, if you admitted to not reading, you'd be in very big trouble. I think I read for information, but I also read, and I have done over the years, writers that I admire. I admire their work, their approach, and they have become my guides. So I read to inform what I do, but I also read to look at other people's style, to find ways that I think help create a better story and a better way of telling a story. So I know on writing, Stephen King has actually published in the back of his book a list of things to read, and that's how much he believes in it. And you know, I mean, I'm the same. I think, and it doesn't matter, you know, if you write predominantly non-fiction, fiction is a huge help. Because, and it doesn't matter, I think it works the other way. You know, if you write predominantly fiction, then non-fiction is also good, because you're constantly being introduced to ways and approaches and ideas that otherwise you wouldn't people your world and enlarge it. And so I think reading is absolutely essential. I think, but sometimes kind of, I think also noticing the gaps, you know, sometimes I write the book, well, actually, always, I write the book that I would like to read. So if I see a kind of gap, if I think this is the kind of thing I would like to read about New Zealand, or about women, or about artists, or about cooks or chefs or whatever, if it's the kind of thing that I'd like to read myself, then the next best thing is, if it's not there on the shelf, to put it on the shelf. And so I think it not only does it allow us to learn and to sort of colour our world with words, but it also it's kind of a research in a way of what's out there, where is the space for your words, what is the gap, what's missing in our world that you have the words for. So yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I think there's that. I can't remember the exact quotation by Toni Morrison, who said something like, if you can't find the book you want to read, then you must write it.
Yes.
We have a question here from Barbara Peterson on this topic, and she says, when you are reading something, it's just gone. When you're reading something and writing at the same time, is there a way to stop the voice of what you are reading leaking into your writing?
Well, that's an interesting idea, and a great way of putting it too, because it is, you are right. You know, you have to keep your own kind of clear voice. You have to hear yourself. But I think that's the skill of doing it more often. You know, of practice and being firm about who you are and what you're saying and how you want to say it. But I think it's a good thing. I always think you don't read to look sideways, you know, and you don't read to become someone else. So yeah, I think, I don't know, Renee, you possibly have some things to say about that.
I don't really have that experience of someone of, you know, I think I'm wrapped up and sort of so intent and concentrated on what I'm doing that really not many other things come in, because when I'm working, that's how I work. And then if I want other things or read other things or listen to other voices, then that's kind of out of work hours, as it were. So I suppose my main struggle with writing is with myself and what I want to do and how close I come to actually achieving that, you know how it is. And, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm never totally, absolutely satisfied. It's, sometimes I get very close and I feel a little bit of pleasure about it. You know, I allow myself to have that. But quite often, I'm still trying when I hand the book over, really.
Yes.
I don't know whether that's a lack of self-confidence or what it is, or whether I think that somewhere there's this golden piece of work that I'm aiming for. But generally speaking, no, I don't have any difficulty with shutting stuff out. Yeah, just lucky, I guess.
I was just going to say, just to add to that one, I kind of am so relieved by the time I've finished a book. I'm so relieved. And I think in that golden glow, I feel like I have got that golden piece of work. So, because it's actually a kind of high that I try and maintain as long as possible. And I hardly ever read anything I've written, ever. In fact, the only time I ever dip into what I've written before is when I have to go and do something seriously major and I need to know what's in there.
What you've done.
Yeah, and if it's a wee while back, usually I can remember, but if it's a long way back, and I do, and sometimes I reread it a long way down, and I think, did I really write that? You know, that's not bad. That's quite professional. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, but
and do you think also there's a kind of exhilaration of the relief that you've actually finished?
Oh.
That's part of the glow. It's not only the book. It's I've actually got to the end. Yeah. And that lasts like for a week or so till you start the next one.
Or until, in my case, the editor gets in touch with you and starts firing bits and pieces at you. I think you're right. There is a golden glow, and then there's the kind of abyss of doubt. But by that stage, it's not so much about the text. It's more about me and how I'm going to progress without actually a book on the. You know, I always want one. I'm desperate for a book or a contract or something like that. So I want the contract, but I want to finish that last book because it like goes on forever. And usually at the end of a book, I lose something, like I'll lose a tooth. Now that's a classic. I'll lose one for some reason. They dig bits of you away when they go. Like, you know, they take bits of you with them. I think books, and last time I got pneumonia, like really badly, and so every time I emerge slightly less of a person than I was when I started. But you know, I think that's because everything goes into that, you know, that what you do, and it always takes a little bit of you away. It adds to your life, but the mortal you is just, well, for me, just a little bit less of me left.
Oh, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought of that. I don't know that happens. I know that I rely on it a lot. Like if I've got bad news, or if something bad has happened, I can go to the computer and I can work and it will become better. I think it's my go-to place as well as my workplace. That may just be the result of years of doing it, but I find it covers almost every thing that I want, really, because it provides the work. I've got to do it, but it also provides somewhere to go if I need not to think about something, or I'm waiting for some news or something like that, then that will do it as well. So in a way, I don't know about you, Jo, but it's kind of a life in a way. I come out of it and I live a different life sort of out of it, but my main life is probably the writing in a way.
Yeah, I think it's comfort. I mean, all through.
As well, yes.
Yeah, it's a kind of comfort and an escape. I think that with nonfiction, it's just as much of an escape for me. I do write some fiction and I have written some fiction, but I find it's an escape into another world, but also into myself and into my imagination and my mind, and that kind of escape. I'll tell you, you pay money for that kind of escape. It's, it's addictions. It's, but for that complete out of body experience that writing gives you, you cannot, you're still, you end up being addicted to writing. And I've always thought.
You're right.
Yeah,
no, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I've always felt that actually my job supported my habit. Because writing certainly wouldn't.
Well, I think teaching and writing are so entwined with me that it's hard to know when one stops and one ends. And because I teach the skills of writing in various forms, I suppose that's natural, that it does, that they all seem to meld. But it is a good combination, I think. I don't know how you feel, but it really, one thing leads into another and the other thing leads back into that one. And yes, it's just sort of one thing really divided into two, because in a way writing is teaching, isn't it?
Yes.
Or it's not, teaching might be the wrong word, but what you are doing is you're putting words on a page to introduce new ideas or fun or smart aleck, somebody to other people. And in a way, when you're teaching, you're doing that as well. You're kind of taking them away to something that a lot of people regard as kind of an airy-fairy pursuit, but in reality, it's quite just like any other job. That's part of teaching, I think. Do you agree with that?
Well, I taught in the past 20 years tertiary, and the last 5 years high school, after losing my job with the design department at Unitec, and I really feel that I loved teaching. I love teaching young or mature, maturing adults. Actually, I like to think that they call them mature students, but you kind of hope they're all a wee bit mature. But I loved
Dream
it.
on, baby.
Yeah, what I loved about it was the exchange of ideas. I always learnt more coming out of a classroom than I really felt I ever had to give. And I love that interaction. I don't get it so much from high school students because, it's usually put that phone away, excuse me, why are you talking, and eating your lunch and all that sort of, please put your sandwiches away. It's kind of, you're always telling someone to put something away. And so although I love the material that I work with and I enjoy that, I just love the exchange with people. I'm kind of an E. I can't help it. No, I'm not that extrovert, but I love that interaction, and it actually informs my practice too.
Yes. Well, my teaching is mainly from people who want to either write a memoir or write a crime novel, and I do poetry ones as well, although I haven't done any for a couple of years. And so it's different to you because they're there because they want to be there, sort of thing.
Yes.
And they're there for a 10-week course, so they're not going to really waste that time. And because I expect them to write 10 pages a week, they really haven't got any time to waste anyway. So if we do the workshop on the Friday, which is a couple of hours of class stuff, and then they go away and write 10 pages to get to me by Wednesday, they haven't got a lot of time to really think about much except writing, which in a way I have found works really well. It kind of focuses my mind and their minds on this one period of time in their lives where they're going to write, and it doesn't matter what else happens, because they have to have 10 pages to Renee on a Wednesday. It's just one of those, whereas you've got the longer haul,
Yes.
which I think is probably the harder.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I taught in colleges for quite a while, English and history. And so, but this is a different sort of setup, I guess. So I enjoy it immensely.
Yeah.
We have a question from Julie Watson for Renee. Were the patches in these two hands some of that daily writing that might have not led to another thing?
No, what happened with that was I just decided on that kind of structure because I really didn't want to write it. People have been nagging me for years about writing my memoir. And I've been saying, yeah. And I just didn't want to do it. It just seemed like a big job and it was a huge fag and I just couldn't be bothered. Anyway, in the end, I got worn down. So I said, okay, I'll write it and you'll just have to put up with the way I do it because I'm not going to do it chronologically. And at that time in my workroom, I had a bookshelf with all my diaries on. And so what I did, apart from the first little bits, I just took any diary off the shelf for that particular patch and wrote from that. And so that's why it's not a chronological thing. Each patch comes with its own story. And then at the end, the reader can kind of patch them all together like a quilt. And so in a way, I have to thank all the people who nagged me to write it because it's only their nagging that made me do it. And it's only their nagging that made me not do it in chronological order. So thank you for that question.
That sort of leads nicely into my next question is, do you think it's important, well, in your case, it wasn't important to plot out the story first, but do you think that in other cases it can be important to plot out a story, or do you just start writing and see where it goes?
I start with an idea, usually a line. Usually I've overheard a line or something that makes me think, and I think about it for a little while before I start. But then I just start, and I don't really know where it's going. I only know a couple of pages on where it's going, and then at night I'll think about it and think of possibilities, dismiss some. And so no, it's just a work of relying on the fact that I will think of something. I do have some social justice things that I think about, but I'd be thinking about them whether I was writing a novel or not. But sometimes they do come into the writing because it suits the story. But generally speaking, I just really don't know where I'm going until I get there. I go and think, really. And I'll always know there's going to be something about theatre in it. But that's the only other thing.
What about you, Jo?
I think I hate chronology. You know, I'm a historian, but I really find that a chronological telling, cradle to grave, if you like, story it just suggests that life is a kind of monotonous trudge through time. And so what I spend quite a bit of time doing is thinking about how I will structure, and this is kind of a loose thing because most of it's in my head, but how am I going to structure a story that is a non-fiction story so that I engage the reader so that they actually really want to keep turning those pages, and they stay with me and they stay with that story as almost like a thriller, if I can, or something with a lot of tension. Yeah. I try to create tension, and I think when I was writing Anne Perry, so that's Juliet Hume from the Parker Hume story. I had the problem. How do you write about a person who did something as dramatic as she did, killing or being part of a duo that killed one of the girls' mothers? How do you kind of tell a story or a life about someone when there's such a big kind of road bump in it? Because it's such a defining road bump in a way that it's like could potentially derail your book, And I remember sitting in an airport. This is like structure, and I had a napkin on beside me. I had a latte, and I was waiting to catch a plane in Wellington, and I thought, I've got it. So I worked out how I would construct the narrative, and how I would structure the story so that we kept thinking about her and didn't actually decide that, she was completely heinous right from the very early on, and in fact stay open to that person, so maybe people could reframe how they saw it. So I remember thinking, like, then I didn't have a contract, and then I finally got one sort of 6 months later. It was confirmed, and I'm going around looking around everywhere for that napkin. Like, it's only got some scrawls, but somehow it meant a lot. And I actually had 2 napkins because I had 2 bursts at it. And I spent like a whole 3 days looking for my napkin that I knew I'd put somewhere safe, because I thought, I'll come back to that. So and I actually constructed that narrative so that there's a young story and an adult story, and they run together through the chapters. And what I'm saying is, for me, I have to pick that moment. I have to work at that structure, but it doesn't have to be in anything more substantial than a napkin.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Yes, but it's very important how you. Like, for me, it's quite important, but because I guess I do that free flow thing, but it has to be within some sort of sense of where it's
a frame.
Yeah.
There has to be a frame, whether it's a patch frame or a chapter frame or whatever it is. There has to be that. Yes, I agree with you. I think that partly writing over years and years is finding out which of the structures suit you best, because you can, if you look at a play, there's very few 3-act plays written now anyway, or played now and anyway, but you have to really look at structure in plays and in poetry for that matter, I guess, but in almost everything. And it's kind of a forbidding word, but it doesn't have to be, because it can be as something as light-hearted as a patch, and it can be as something as serious as, a formal chapter in a book. And I only have a few dislikes for me, not for other people, but just for me. Like, I don't like prefaces or prologues, and so I don't use them myself. I start right at the beginning and go on. But so I kind of always know to a certain extent what kind of frame I'm going to be using. But outside of that, I just let it go and let the writing will take me. I have perfect faith, if that's the right word, that it will.
Yeah.
And I'm not scared of deleting. I couldn't care less. If I delete it, I delete, so what? And then I'll just start again and do it.
I can delete my own, but I hate it when an editor does it.
Oh, do you?
Oh. Well, I don't. I don't. But I remember kind of when my first book. I mean, I felt like almost one of those characters in a movie that's going into jail, and there they are standing there and someone's got a high pressure hose, and there's lice, they're being deloused, because I felt that you know, when you put a word down on the page, you know, after you've lived with it for a long time,
Yes.
then that's kind of like you've created gospel, but
Well, you're right. You're right. I think it is. There's a pang about it, especially with some bits.
yes,
Not everything. Of course, you see the sense of most of what an editor does, but there are some bits that you would die in a ditch over, probably.
yes,
Or,
yes.
or you know, that sounds a bit dramatic, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, letting go of some things is quite hard, but I do think that it's a fantastic conversation you have with your editor. Really, you know, it's one of those great moments of, in a way, distillation. Because if you've got a really good editor, and I've had some work with some great people, you know, it's that moment where, although you're very exposed in some of the changes that people's and some of the challenges you're given, where you feel exposed, it's also a learning process. You know, I've learned quite a lot with that relationship, and you know, I think that's it's helpful to be challenged about your writing, and the big thing I think is to listen. You know, you can dismiss people's comments. You can say, oh, you know, far out, they must have had a couple of Chardonnays before they came up.
What do they know?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So, also, people, sometimes when it's not quite true, it could have some truth in it. You know, and I think that's part of, there's a humility that you have to have when you're writing.
Well, I think that it is fatal to show it to a friend or a family member or anyone like that, because they're just going to say it's good. I mean,
yes.
they're just going to say it's wonderful, darling. And what you have to show it in the end to someone like an editor who is going to look at it as a piece of work and give you some feedback. And if some of the feedback's not what you think you're going what you've been expecting, then that's just tough, because they represent the reader, don't they?
Yes, they do, yes.
They represent the reader, and so they're just doing their best for this piece of work to make a reader want to read it and enjoy the reading process. But I always tell my students, don't go showing it, you know, to your mother or family or whatever, because they what can they say? They can only say it's wonderful, darling.
Yeah, well, especially your partner, you know, like it's like that's separation material, isn't it? Really,
yes.
You know.
Yes, don't ever do that.
No, but I think I generally do show it to my partner, actually, my work, but that's because she can be a little challenging. So I think that it's quite good if she doesn't, if Sue doesn't understand it, then I think I really do have to go back to the drawing board.
Oh yes. Yes, I agree.
From that point of view. But you're right though. You know, you show it to like a friend, they have an obligation to you and that relationship.
Yes.
And, you know, giving someone the hard word is not going to help.
Well, exactly. Like, I mean, and I've been doing it for so long. If I gave it to someone and it was dreadful, they wouldn't tell me, because they would think it was them. Like, you've really got to give it to someone impartial. Because it doesn't matter how long you've been going, you can still write crap and not see that it doesn't work, or that it's in the wrong, it may not be crap, but it's in the wrong place, or it's not for this story, or something like that.
Yes.
And you need a trained eye to tell you that. And of course, if you respect the person, and I've had one or two like editors that I totally and utterly respect, and one of them once said to me, Renee, you should eschew exclamation marks. And I was so charmed by someone using the word eschew in a spoken sentence that I immediately gave up exclamation marks, and I've never used one since. And I think my writing's better for it.
Yes. Yeah. It's. I think sort of taking on board, workshops are good too. I did a master's workshop in upstate New York with a fantastic sort of masterclass it was, and he was a teacher at Yale, and sorry, Harvard, and I knew it was something Ivy, and he was fantastic. You know, he like just what he had to say, just sitting in the chair and just ruminating about writing. I thought, wow, and it changed my writing. You know, it changed my writing. He, you know, one of the big tips is never ever use it was. And I thought, he said to me, you use it was, you know, the beginning of a sentence. And he said, you get away with it. But he said, it's useless. You know, it doesn't say anything. It's a nothing. It's so like, and he you know, the more active verbs and, you know, those sort of ideas really do activate and sort of heat up your writing. And I feel so grateful to this guy for his brilliant advice. You know,
it's a kind of, to me, teaching someone about writing a memoir or a crime novel is really an indulgence on my part, because I like talking about writing, and you really don't meet many people. I mean, if you go out to a party or something and someone asks you what you do and you say you're a writer, well, that's a total killer. Yeah, they all go away and you never see them again. But if you've got these people in this room and they've actually paid to be there, they've got to stay while you do this thing that you like, which is talk about writing, and you give them some you know, structural advice and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's not very often anyone really wants you to talk about it. Yeah. So in a way, it's really nice to be together on with you and both doing the thing we like, which is, yes, well, not quite, we like writing best perhaps, and then talking about it next, which is an indulgence that we can't always do.
Yeah, it's you know, you're right, absolutely right. I was just thinking really quick, but arrival cards. I used to arrive, and I was a lecturer, so I wrote that down, and I always got the canine queue. You know, in other words, the dog sniffs your bags, you go straight through.
Yeah.
So then I was a teacher, and I put on my arrival card back in New Zealand, teacher, so that I got on the canine queue and it sniffed my bags, and that was fine. And so, like, I said to my partner, what shall I write? Shall I put writer?
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
They were completely searched. I got the X-ray queue and everything was looked at. So I thought from that day on, I'm not a writer. I'm a teacher or a lecturer or something else, because you're instantly, you know, people are a bit suspicious of you. But one of the things that I think in terms of process, you know, with writing is I walk. So I walk and I write my stories when I'm walking. And when I was in upstate New York, and it was February, and so upstate New York is, yeah, pretty close to Canada, obviously, and so it was fairly chilly in February, and I would walk and write my stuff in my hand and just have a few notes, maybe just a few A4 pages. Sometimes I didn't even have any pages, and I would write, and I found the momentum of movement changed the way I wrote, as much as being challenged, and as much as deciding to make my verbs more active and my this, that. The process of actually moving through the world physically changed my writing. It became more fluid, and it had its own movement, and I could do it on the way to work, because I was teaching, so you know, there's no other time really, and it changed the way that I wrote, and it kept those voices at bay, because you couldn't carry around any other voice but the one you had in your head, because you only had, you know, your pen and your pad, and yet there was nothing. And when I wrote Hudson and Halls, I walked one day I walked 33k writing in that freezing cold, and I didn't know it was cold, and I didn't even know that I was walking uphill because I was so zoned into that process.
Well, I walk, but I wouldn't be actually writing. I might be thinking about what would happen next, or if I've got a bit of a problem, I might be thinking about that. But what I was listening to a Jim Mora thing on Sunday where the woman was telling him that she used walking as a way of solving problems, and that if you set a problem at the start of a walk, by the end of it you would have an answer. Well, I didn't really believe that. So I went for a walk and I deliberately gave myself a problem, and within 15 paces I had the answer. And it was such a surprise, and it was such a surprise answer too, because of course it was perfectly doable, but I had never thought of it.
Yeah.
It brought in a character that I'd already got, and in such a way that was perfectly okay and pushed the story on. But I would never have thought of it if I hadn't set up the thing about what would be the best thing to do to end this particular chapter. And yeah, so I agree with you. I don't actually do the writing, but I'm happy to set up problems and then just put them out of my head and walk and look at things, and then bingo, the answer is there.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think possibly we could probably do that to any kind of movement. Like if you were just busily kind of making beds and doing the washing and hanging it out and doing all those sorts of movements, you could possibly put a question up at the beginning of the thing, and then by the end of it you might have the answer as well. So it's not a matter of where you walk. Do you think it's a matter of movement rather?
I think it is movement. Yeah, totally it is. And it's a way, it's something happens to your brain. I've got a really interesting article from the New Yorker on it, but something in your brain actually changes when you move. When you move, there's a kind of different processing that goes on, and it's a very creative way of solving problems. But I find actually writing is amazing, as long as you have to watch when you cross the road, because
Yes. Yeah.
and that's a very important thing. And also there's the occasional electric box in the middle of the pavement, which is very disconcerting. But especially if you bump into it. But I find I actually find it. There's something about the energy that it creates as well for me. There's an end of my exhaustion.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the most exciting thing for me is actually doing it. Sitting down and writing is, it's a kind of challenge. It's a kind of, I've set it up myself. It's me challenging myself, I suppose. I've thought of this crime, I've thought of a novel, I've thought of characters, and I've thought of an ongoing kind of link with everybody. And then it's just the sheer pleasure of it, of actually getting it down, because even though sometimes it makes me annoyed that I can't think what I want, and sometimes I get frustrated because it will not go how I want, but there's a kind of overall pleasure in the fact that I'm doing this job that I really like. And how many of us can say that?
I can't.
Those are the two jobs I've liked most that I've done, is teaching and writing, and I feel really lucky that I still can do them.
Yeah.
I don't do any more in the classroom teaching, but I do it by online, and there's a great pleasure in that as well. So so maybe one of the things that keeps us writing, in spite of the, you kind of have disappointments and things, but maybe the overriding pleasure of it the solving of it is the thing that makes for keeping, making us keep going.
Yeah, and it is the solving of it, isn't it? It's kind of like weaving things together in a very, very satisfying kind of way, where you feel that there is a wholeness, and it's like discovering something. It has a great power of it is a really powerful thing, and I think it changes your life, because in terms of my life, I'm introduced to people that I would never meet. It's sort of like I write on a journey, so I write as I walk, but I also see writing as a journey, because it introduces people that you wouldn't otherwise meet. It sort of becomes your life, and that's why I wrote on the arrival sheet finally that I was a writer. Now they've cut them out, so I'd probably just get the X-ray machine. But anyway, but the thing is that it does people your world with people you would not meet normally, and opportunities, and you get, you end up going on writers events, and I don't know, things, writers festivals and things that you would never do normally, and you meet in some ways it becomes you and your journey, and it's very hard. I always have that black moment when I fail to believe in what I'm doing, and that usually, and then I decide that I'll give it up. That I think I've been insulted once too many by not being given anything or any opportunities or whatever, and I'm writing this book yet again without the funding that I've applied for. I'm only going to swear if I say anything, but so I'll leave it there. But and I think, I'm just not doing this anymore, and it lasts until really something else always seems to come along. Something else in that life always comes along, and you get caught up in something, and then an opportunity comes, or you meet someone who likes what you do, and that feedback is just so important. And so
I think that is true. I think I know what convinced me that I would write for the rest of my life. And that was in the early 80s, when I took the feminist reviews that I wrote around the country, and women were just so generous. They came out on bitterly cold nights, and they really were so wonderful. They convinced me that I did have something to say that people wanted to hear. And so I always have had that as my woolly blanket, that rug that you pull around you. And occasionally I'll hear from someone from those days, and they may have read something I've written, or, just want to say hello or something. And that is such a treat, because you realise that, like all those years ago, you did touch somebody just with words, and because they are, sometimes they don't do what you want them to do and all that kind of thing, but sometimes they just do.
Yes.
And you're standing somewhere and you say something, and you touch someone. And for me, that's probably what keeps me writing.
Yeah.
I think it's that moment of complete communication that you have with someone is worth all the days that you spend thinking, why the hell am I doing this, and I'm no good, and this is no good, and no one likes me, and all that sort of thing. And then you get a little ping on the computer, and it's an email from someone saying, hi Renee, you won't remember me, but and there you are. There you are.
It's a powerful thing, isn't it? And I think the also this, you were talking about social justice. Some of the books that I wanted to read on the shelves about the artists, I started out as a sort of writing art history, and actually writing biographical art history. And it was women's stories that I felt had languished way behind men. They hadn't been studied, they hadn't been written, and they hadn't been appreciated. So in terms of repopulating history with the people that should have been there all along, but because they were discriminated against for various reasons. So I've always kind of, those are the books that I've wanted to read, and those are the books that I've written. And it is that because what you've done really with your writing is give people what they need to understand the world, and to help understand the world. And I think we see ourselves reflected back in literature, the literature we read, and I think probably right. But if you don't have that, if it's not out there, if you're not seeing those plays or reading those books, then you don't exist. You don't exist in the world.
You're so right, because for so many novels that I've read anyway, the world is totally heterosexual, and
Absolutely.
There are no brown people in it, and there's just these nice middle-class people who've all never known what it's like to be hungry or cold. They always have had a warm bed, and the worst thing that can happen to them is the cafe's closed and they can't get a hot coffee. And
COVID-19.
So I like to have, I think that's why I like to write about small country towns, because of the mix of people, the heterosexual, the takatapui, the male and female, the different cultures. Like, it's just a microcosm, and so fascinating. And then you have the overriding story, which is, whatever it is. And the thing that I get criticised for by some, and in a way, and they're quite right in a way, is that I have too many characters, and so I generally end up cutting some out. But I always think, well, if I'm going to write about stuff that's got theatre in it, you usually do have, a few characters, and so but I really like to think that my background, and the first novel I ever published, the two heroes were two lesbians, and who'd lived together for a while, and one had a daughter who wanted to get married. So it's just always it's not been an argument for me. I've always just done it.
Yes.
Because that's the community I live in.
Well, I see in the classroom, I see people, young people who really don't have that library of worlds that reflect their existence, and I see them isolated because their stories aren't there yet.
Yes.
And I think that until they are there, those people will always see themselves as an adjunct to the communities they're in, because they're not actually, they're not incorporated into them. And I see that as so sad. And that's what we have to tackle, I think, is to people our world with people that reflect a much richer picture of life. And we have a special set of problems and issues. Well, certainly my life is which I've never read about, really, because people didn't write that kind of fiction, and not very many people did.
Well, not many publishers would publish it.
Absolutely.
I think, because they wouldn't get enough sales or like that, I suppose. And you can sort of see their point of view because they're in business.
Yeah.
But it seems to me there's, at least 95% of the novels we might have on the shelves portray a world that is fairly narrow.
He is. I think so. It's broadened with fantasy and dystopian stories and things like that. But really, the world is still very. It's still very difficult for kids or young people to find those kind of stories that I was teaching on Friday. And I was talking about. We were talking about signs. You know, the woman's toilets has the skirt on and the man's toilet has the trousers on, you know, those little icon figures. And I said, you know, this is a world, you know, that this is socially constructed, this notion. And we see it as symbol, we understand that symbol, but it's socially constructed. I said there was a time when men wore makeup and wigs and high heels, and it was perfectly okay. And they had lacy collars. And, you know, that was defined as masculine, and it was totally acceptable. And you know, this kid who I know probably is, you know, that story means more to, was there going, and he couldn't help himself. He said yes. And I thought, wow, you know, we need more of those kind of stories. So people, so he can see himself.
Thank you, Gina.
Wonderful. On that wonderful note, we have come up to 3 p.m.
Wow.
And we need to wrap it up there. Thank you so much to both of you, Renee and Joanne, for that wonderful conversation. It's incredibly inspiring to listen to you. Thank you to everyone who has made this session possible, especially the same but different team. And thank you to Creative New Zealand. Thanks also to all of you for supporting this festival and joining us today. Mā te wā.
Mā te wā. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you.